Well, welcome back to week 4 of the Warrior Group series. My name is Kelly and I serve as the Middle River campus pastor here at Freedom Church. And hey, I want to say thank you so much for taking a big step and being a part of this group. I'm sure for some of you, this is the first time that you've ever been in a community group. And we're really proud of you for taking a step and having the courage to dive in. We say it all the time that we're not designed by God to do life alone. And the fact that you're coming together, iron sharpening iron, is going to help you become more like Christ because of your time around other believers. Well, this is the last week of our Warrior Group series, and we're going to talk about the wounded warrior. And this can be a tough one. It's tough because it's not only complex, but it also touches on some really deep areas of a man's soul. But if we've learned anything about our warrior heart, it's that we don't back down just because something is hard. Tonight, we're going to talk about something called the father wound. It's often written that every man carries a father wound in his heart. And truthfully, every man also has a wound from his mother as well. Guys, the way that we were raised and the wounds that we received from our parents, they do play a big part in how we live as men. And just as powerful are all the good and life-giving things that our parents did for us as well. Like many of you, I'm a son and I'm a father. And so I've been on the receiving end of the good and the bad from my parents, but I've also been on the giving side of the good and the bad of parenting. So as we dive in today, this first question goes like this. Every parent, or maybe for you, a guardian, a grandparent, depending on your upbringing, but every parent has strengths and weaknesses. So briefly talk about how you were raised. What was something that was a blessing about how you grew up, and what was something that was a challenge? Now, the answers will be really different because we all grew up in different types of homes. Some are from broken homes. Some had a single parent. Some were not raised by their parents at all. And so just talk freely about your experience growing up. Again, what was something that was really valuable and meaningful that you took from the relationship with your mom and dad? And what was something that created a challenge? In the Bible, there are so many father-son relationships that are written about. Two of the most contrasting stories are the relationships between King David and his son Absalom, and then the relationship between Jesus and his Father in heaven. Now, we don't have time to go into all of the details, but just trust me when I tell you that the relationship between King David and his son Absalom was totally jacked up. In fact, it is a very tragic and sad ending. And what's interesting among all the dysfunction between them is that David, as a father, he didn't know how to say he was sorry. He didn't know how to reconcile, and so neither did Absalom. And one of the key elements that was missing from their relationship seems to be that David rarely, if ever, blessed Absalom with his words. But then we look at this total opposite relationship between God the Father and Jesus the Son. It's a very special and intimate relationship. In fact, there's this moment when Jesus is baptized that we get to see how awesome the relationship really was. After Jesus was baptized, the Father affirmed Jesus publicly. There were essentially 3 things that the Father said to and about Jesus at his baptism. He said this, I believe in you, I'm proud of you, and I'll always love you. And here's what I know about all of you guys. All of you can think back to a moment when you heard one or all of those statements by maybe your mom or your dad, and it deeply impacted your heart. Moments when your father said, I am proud of you, or I believe in you. Or you would give anything to have one of those things said to you by someone important in your life. You would give anything to have someone say, no matter what, I'll always love you. Or to have someone look at you in the eyes and say, I believe in you. Listen, guys, those are really important, emotionally affirming words when we hear them. And we can feel very, very desperate for that kind of affirmation when we don't hear them. Words of blessing spoken over us, or the absence of those words, can really affect our lives. But here's the deal. Listen to me. We can all decide how we will, as men, live our lives. If we missed out on the blessing from a father or a mother, we can choose how we're going to handle that. We can let it wreck us, or we can choose to let God speak those blessings over us from His Word. When I was really young, my mom and dad divorced. My brothers and I lived with my mom, and my sister lived with my dad. And for a few years, I only saw my dad once a year around the holidays. And I can tell you, I can't remember one time when I was little that my father told me that he was proud of me or that he believed in me. And that lack of affirmation left a mark on me and caused me to become a pretty angry young man. I looked for affirmation from friends, from girls, from money, from popularity, and it all spun out of control in a life of drug abuse and chaos. But after I started following Jesus, God began this awesome work of healing my heart. I learned that He loves me no matter what. I learned that He was proud of me and that He believed in me even when I failed. He even connected me with other men who would speak those words of blessing over my life. And guys, then I became a father. And I've known the joy over the years of affirming my kids, of looking them in the eye and letting them know that I was so proud of them, that even after they had blown it, that I still love them no matter what. Now, I didn't always get it right, but by the grace of God, I've had the privilege of seeing God turn my story around for good. And that can be your story too. So, rather than looking toward the past, what I want to do is look toward the future. And I'm going to assume that some of you are parents, or you will be one day. Maybe you have a son, or you've got a daughter. And the truth is, all of you are followers somewhere. Here at Freedom Church, maybe you serve in Freedom Kids, or Freedom Students, or Freedom College. Or you could be someone that's going to influence others at a future community group. Maybe you're a coach out in the community somewhere, or you're a teacher, or you could be an influencer at your job. Listen, here's the deal. There are people out there that really, really need to hear affirmation from you. Whether you did or did not receive the blessing of affirmation growing up, God wants to turn that around for someone else. He wants you to be the one that speaks those same words to someone else who needs to hear them. If you look at these three different things that God the Father says to Jesus, I want you to think about which one could you say to the people in your life. Now, it is not always easy. Maybe it's difficult for you to say, I believe in you, because maybe sometimes you don't believe in that person. Or maybe it's difficult to say, I'm proud of you, because maybe you're kind of hard on yourself and you're hard on the people around you. Or maybe it's really hard for you to express that deep, heartfelt emotion of love. Like it's hard for you to just say, I really love you to someone, especially if you rarely heard that growing up yourself. But guys, listen to me. We're pushing you in this Warrior series. I want to encourage you to grow in affirming the people that you have influence over in your life, especially if it's your children. Maybe even the children of your friends or the kids at church. I am so thankful for other people who have influenced my kids for the good. I know that in the lives of my children, when they've had other influencers say things like, you're special, or you're gifted, or I believe in you, or I really care about you, or you have something that God can use to make a difference, it has really impacted my kids. So let's talk about those statements. Which one do you need to grow in expressing to someone in your life? It might be really specific, like I need to let my daughter know that I will always love her no matter what. Maybe there's someone at work or in your family that you can affirm. Which one will you pick? I'm proud of you, I believe in you, and I love you. Let's go ahead and talk about which one you need to grow in expressing to those around you. Well, Warriors, here we go. The final question of our 4-part group series on the Warrior. Let's look back on what we've covered over the last few weeks. In the first week, we looked at the reality that of all the different attributes of God, and He has so many, one of the attributes is that He is a warrior. Now, yes, Jesus was full of love, grace, and mercy and peace, and at the same time, He is the greatest warrior that ever lived. And we talked about the fact that you have the heart of a warrior as well. There is a fight inside of you. You've got someone to protect, and you've got a kingdom to advance. The second week, we looked at the insecure warrior. God says to us, you're a mighty warrior. And we say, well, I don't feel like it sometimes. We talked about how to become confident, not in our own abilities, but in the confidence that comes from Christ in us. In week 3, we talked about the warrior's weakness. Every warrior can be distracted. And if we're not where we're supposed to be, not engaged in the battle, sometimes we can be very vulnerable to lust. We had some incredibly intimate and really powerful discussions about how we can safeguard our lives and let any sexual wounds of the past be healed by the presence of God so that we can fight with purity and integrity as warriors. And then this week, the final week, we've talked about the father wound, or in some cases it might be the mother wound. Maybe you should have received something different from your parents and there's a wound, but now you're starting to see that God can turn that around and use you to speak words of life to others. What I'd like for you to do is think back through the last 4 weeks. Is there one takeaway, one application, one thing that God has shown you that stands out the most? Maybe you can think of one way that you'll be different because God has shown you something. Maybe it's a principle, or maybe it's a line, or a story, or an application. What's the one thing that stands out to you the most in our 4 weeks together? Guys, again, we are so glad that you've jumped in to become the warrior that God created you to be. Remember, you don't surrender. You have the power of the risen Christ in you. A warrior is not a warrior because he always wins. A warrior is a warrior because he never stops fighting.